Yes, thanks for the opportunity here to talk about silica sand. It's an emerging sector in the ASX. Since we sort of pivoted into silica sand a couple of years ago, there are a number of other players in this sector, and I think it'll become quite an important sector ultimately in the ASX. But silica sand is a bit of an unknown commodity. It's one of those commodities that you're totally surrounded by all the time without ever sort of thinking about it. Not just glass that's in windows, but glass that's in your car. Probably the monitor you're looking at, it's got a thin film on it, which is silica, and the LCDs are all silica sand as well, silica. So and also, you know, the paint that is around you has got silica in it, and probably the concrete is more significant than any other. The silica sand is a commodity where it's the most used commodity on the planet after air and water. It's about 50 billion tonnes of silica sand is used each year. Over 49 billion tonnes of that is used in concrete. And therein lies the problem a bit for the industry. But we've decided we'll get into silica sand because not only is it used everywhere and increasingly being used, but the supply is getting less, and it's getting more and more difficult to access areas to mine or in some cases dredge silica sand. Move on. We've got 4 projects. They're all at different stages. We've got projects that are nearing the end of the environmental approvals process. We've got some sort of in the middle of that process, and some we've just completed resources on. But they are very large. These are multi-year, multi-decade long, very large sand deposits, and they're probably the most advanced non-private silica sand projects in Australia. We've got mining leases on each of the projects, and really it's the permitting is our biggest hurdle, and that's the one we've been doing the most work on in the last couple of years. We're starting with Arrowsmith North. That's a project which sits 270 k's north of Perth, followed by Muchea, which is about 50 k's north of Perth. Arrowsmith Central is near Arrowsmith North, and Boyatup is down near Esperance. So they're all in Western Australia. And we're getting quite a bit of interest. We were published in the Austrade Critical Minerals Prospectus just before Christmas. That's been widely distributed by Austrade, and the number of we're getting sort of 2 inquiries a week ever since then, and from potential buyers that we didn't really expect to hear from, and more so recently quite a number from India, because there's been a number of trade delegations have gone to India lately, and they've distributed that prospectus, so we've got a lot of interest from there. But ultimately, we would like to be manufacturing glass here in Western Australia. Next slide. I guess the most important thing is that each of these projects produces a subtly different product. Sand is not sand is not sand. So, and that subtle difference determines which market it will go into. For example, Arrowsmith North, Arrowsmith Central, they can produce a product that would go into flat glass, and these days automobile glass is a huge market, and it doesn't matter whether it's an electric vehicle, there's just as much glass involved in those. And we're finding other markets as well more recently for that particular product. But strangely enough, Arrowsmith North happens to produce probably the best quality foundry sand in the world. And AFS 55 is the main product we can produce from there. That is in high demand. And it's the market there mainly is Korea, which has the largest foundry industry in the world, and also Japan. We selected these sites for a number of reasons. One, they are all on vacant or unallocated Crown land, and they've got infrastructure nearby. It's a main road. Number 1 highway runs past 3 of these projects, as do railway lines. So we've got access to ports for export. As it happens, the Dampier and Dongra gas pipelines run either through or adjacent to each of these projects, which gives us opportunities to perhaps develop downstream processes. Permitting is well advanced, and I'll talk about that a little bit more down the track. Next slide. Arrowsmith North. We would have thought environmental approvals were a little bit advanced in the last couple of months, really. We lodged I'll get to that. We've got a large reserve. This is good for 100 years. We've grade controlled, approved ore reserve for the first 6 years of production. The plant process is quite unique. And in fact, there's a patent pending on the process circuit, particularly what we call hydrofloat. The main impurity we have at Arrowsmith North is feldspar, which is not easy to separate from quartz because they're quite a similar SG. But in fact, the hydro sizer and the hydro flotation actually deals with that. So there are no spirals involved in this. It's quite unique. But unused railway line, water, we've established a bore already. It's quite deep, it's 400 metres deep, but plenty of water. Brand Highway is right next to the project. And we're looking at probably less a hybrid power supply at the moment, as getting access to we're quite advanced in discussions on getting access to a wellhead and getting access to gas after it's dewatered, but before it's compressed. Next slide. The environmental approvals have taken much longer than we anticipated. What used to take weeks is taking months at the moment. We lodged the 4th revision of our ERD just before Christmas. And we're waiting for a response now. We've had a number of telephone discussions. As far as we know, they don't require any more information or any clarification. So we're just waiting for notification of when we expect this, the latest version to be published. And that's the next step, is public review. We've been waiting all this time since before Christmas. So as soon as we get that, we'll notify everybody, but also it'll become a public document on the EPA website and also our website. We've lodged a mining proposal with DMERS, and that runs in parallel. We expect to get approvals there, subject to the EPA approval. But it is all moving ahead. Next. Arrowsmith Central, we lodged the 2nd stage of the EPA process, the environmental scoping document, and that outlines the studies that are required for the EPA to conduct its assessment. We lodged that in June last year. We're still waiting for a response on that. Generally, the EPA won't run these in parallel, so they won't consider this project until there's a break or possibly during the public review comment period, they may assess the ESD. Move on. This is the type of bushland that is at Arrowsmith North and also Arrowsmith Central. It's called Quongan Heath. It's about waist high. As you can imagine, our target ore source here is loose sand. So the vegetation is not going to be quite thick. It's pretty arid countryside, so it doesn't grow tall. But more important in this case is that the root systems are very shallow. The roots here only go sort of 300-400 mil below the surface. So we've developed a rehabilitation technique to take care of that. Next slide. We'll come back to that, the VDT. Muchea, much higher grade. This has a different market. This is the market that we're looking for the production of ultra clear glass. And the biggest demand for that is the producers of the piece of glass that goes over solar panels. There's a huge demand for that. And you can imagine the market is growing at about 30% per year. So there's huge demand for it. Also, there's very little supply of this quality sand available worldwide. You know, they're having to go to the extremes of acid washing, lower quality sand to remove impurities. To get the quality sand, you need to make ultra clear glass. So this has the greatest potential for downstream processing for glass manufacturing and a whole bunch of other downstream potential for high quality flour and moving into high tensile fiberglass. It's got all the infrastructure we need, and it's about 50 kilometres north of Perth. Next slide. Muchea's, the difference here is that all the low bush there is once again only about waist high, but it has these Banksia menziesii, the taller Banksia. As it happens, the Banksia are quite easy to propagate. It's the grasses and the sedges, the recalcitrant species here. And our VDT, this method we've used for rehabilitation, actually deals with all the sedges and grasses. Next slide. And this is a process whereby we take out a sod of earth. It's a modified bucket on a loader, and it takes out a sod about 3 metres by 3 metres and takes out about 400 millimetres of topsoil. So it keeps all the microbes intact, the roots intact, and we find that this vegetation recovers the fastest out of any other rehabilitation method. So this is our preferred method. However, it's taken quite some time for the EPA to accept the fact that this is a superior method. Next. It's a simple process. It's not a sophisticated plant. The key to this, strangely enough, is attritioning. And that's an agitated slurry where it polishes each of the grains and you get a nice clean quartz grain, which is the silica dioxide we're chasing. Next. We take our ESG responsibilities very seriously, and we're always looking at opportunities to try and reduce our footprint, reduce our emissions, and make sure we're committing to our social license to operate in this district in the Midwest. Next slide. We're looking at a few more initiatives. We've been shortlisted for Industry Attraction Fund grant, and that's to look at the production of silica flour. We've got a source of high quality quartz that we can access, or we can actually take a cut off our Muchea production line of very high quality, less than 50 ppm iron silica sand, which can be ground into a flour. That's a surprising demand, particularly from LCDs. We were published in the Critical Minerals Prospectus. VDT, we've actually applied for a native vegetation clearing permit at Muchea to trial it and see how we're going to deal with those bigger trees. We've made a number of applications for geothermal permits near Arrowsmith. We did that about May last year. We're still waiting on a response there. And we're investigating power sources to use the abundant gas that is now becoming available around our Arrowsmith projects. Next. We've got a quite experienced board. Ryan Baxter joined us just before Christmas. Neil Kim is our marketing manager. He's based in KL. He's over 17 years experience in selling silica sand, which is why we're actively talking to about 8 major glass manufacturers about offtake. They've been, a number of them have been down here for site visits, and they're waiting to see us a little bit further down the EPA process before they commit to offtake. But we have 2 committed offtake partners for foundry sand in Korea. Next. The share price has been a little bit ordinary lately, mainly because the news flow through EPA delays does not help the share price. So hopefully we get some news out of that in the next few months and we can resurrect that share price. Next. I guess this is what we sort of say, we're at the right time in the right place. We've got extremely large resources. You know, we can produce up to 99.9%, but a number of different products. We can get access to the gas in the Midwest, and, you know, in the near term, maybe access to hydrogen as well. Other raw materials that are required to produce glass, we can also access or be able to buy here, and they're produced here in Western Australia. We're looking to a number of major glass manufacturers about putting glass manufacturing in Muchea, particularly for ultra clear glass. And there's potential for further downstream assembly of solar panels. And I think that's about it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Bruce. We're a bit over time, to be honest. So we've got time for one question. And then if you don't mind, if you've got time, there's several more questions if you could answer directly just by typing in the answer live. There's questions around what's the funding plan moving forward once approved. If we could just have a quick answer on that, if you don't mind.
We're in the process of finalising an independent technical review that will form the basis of due diligence when we're talking to financiers. We've got about 6 financiers that we're talking to. The plant construction, we expect to do the majority of that with debt. We might need some equity down the track. We've got enough money in there at the moment. We're not spending a lot. You know, this EPA process is not expensive. It's frustrating and time consuming, but we don't spend a lot of money on it. All the studies that are required have been completed, so all the big expenditure is finished. We've just finished refurbishing some equipment that we bought, so that expenditure will slow down as well.
Great, Bruce. That's all we have time for. I'm sorry. Thank you for your time and have a nice weekend.
Thanks, Tim. Nice chatting.